name is Christian Martin, and I'm delighted today to introduce our speakers. So I'll get right to it. Hannah Williams and James Daniels are social activists and content creators in the DC metro area, tackling a significant issue, equal pay. After Hannah discovered she was underpaid due to secretive pay structures, she was inspired to create a viral series, Salary Transparent Street. Through their street interviews, Hannah and James educate more than 2 million people in their community on different careers, market rates, salary negotiation, and workers' rights to help close persistent pay gaps that marginalize women, minorities, workers with disabilities, and the LGBTQ plus community. Please give a warm welcome to Hannah Williams and James Daniels.
It's really an honor to be invited here and speaking with you all. We are from the DMV, even though we've been around the country, so some people don't know that we're from this area. So it really is an honor to be recognized by your own state and the people in your state. So thank you for having us. So our little speech is called Lunch with Salary Transparent Street. All right, so let's talk quickly about what Salary Transparent Street is if this is the first time you've heard about it. Long story short, we create content for social media. So we are on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, you name it. We are even on LinkedIn and YouTube because my dad didn't want to get TikTok, which makes sense. So we're everywhere. If you can't find us, we're everywhere. We have 2.5 million total followers across all our platforms. Thank you. We started last April 16th, 2022 to be exact. So to have that following is pretty crazy in a short amount of time. Our videos have garnered over 800 million views. We've been to 22 states around the country now. Our goal is to hit all 50 to show pay transparency around the country. We've also been to 2 countries because pay transparency is not just a national issue, it's an international issue, and all countries right now have some type of issue with equal pay. We'll do a quick introduction of who we are. So James, take it away.
So yeah, I'll start. Marine Corps veteran, served 8 years. First 4 was doing. First 4 was doing a motor team mechanic. Last 4 was doing psychological operations and information operations. After that, I left the Marine Corps. Kind of didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. Job hopped for a bit and found myself doing information operations planning for the Army as a contractor.
Yeah, I will use this one. So I'm Hannah. I went to Northern Virginia Community College. I graduated in 2017. Right after that, I transferred to Georgetown University, Hoya Saxa, if we've got any Hoyas in here. I graduated from the MSB with a management degree in 2019. I was one of the few seniors graduating in my class that did not have a job lined up. I didn't want to go into consulting or finance, which is kind of tough if you go to the MSB. And I got a job in telemarketing. I was cold calling people, trying to sell them legal software. I hated it. It was not for me. I cried basically every day. And I found a way to break into tech as a data analyst in government contracting, which kind of leads us back to Salary Transparent Street, full circle. I found out I was underpaid. So in 2019 or 2021, I accepted a job as a senior data analyst making $90,000 a year, which sticker shock. If you're 23 years old making $90,000 a year, you don't question it. You wonder what kind of matrix you're in and how you got to make that much money. Funny enough, I actually found out that I was underpaid about $20,000 to $25,000 compared to other people doing the exact same thing in my industry where I lived. So a rude awakening that negotiation and market research was really important, but this isn't something that's taught in schools or taught to anybody. And as you all know, pay secrecy is definitely the norm. Pay transparency is still a little taboo. So it inspired me to go on the street with my, at the time, fiance and ask people, what do you do and how much do you make? We posted our first video on April 16th, went to sleep. The next day, it had over 1 million views, which is crazy. Yeah, that was my exact reaction. And I turned to James and I was like, I think we might have something here. Like the videos, the views are telling us that this is important, that it's not just something that we recognize as an issue, but millions of other people do too. 3 weeks later, I quit my job to run Salary Transparent Street full time. He followed.
Yeah, about a month later, I followed.
He got cold feet, but it's okay.
It was the coffee that she offered.
It was the coffee. So we've been doing this full time now, basically since we started. And our whole purpose is just going around, literally asking strangers, what do you do and how much do you make? We've interviewed people in trades, people in healthcare, people in tech, you name it. And a lot of people have shared salary transparency with us because they also understand the value of it. If you don't know how much you can make in a role, you're much more likely to accept an offer, just like I did, that's drastically less than what your peers are making. But pay transparency solves the issue that we have. So this is who we are and this is what we do. Why is salary transparency important? The number one reason that we started it was because of the gender pay gap. As I mentioned earlier, almost every country in the world has some form of gender pay gap. In the United States right now, according to the Department of Labor, the pay gap stands at around 83.5 cents per dollar, and it gets even worse when it's distributed amongst minorities, the LGBTQ plus community, and workers with disabilities. It's an important issue that needs a lot of attention, and the only way that we can consider to help it and somewhat close that gap is to share actual numbers, share how much people can make in different roles so that they aren't undervaluing themselves when they accept an offer or negotiate. The other important reason for salary transparency is workers want it. Several studies have been done that show over 90% of workers want some form of pay transparency within organizations, but companies, despite legislation and what workers are saying they want, are moving very slowly in that direction. And so our goal is to help push them, give them a nice little shove, a little nudge in the right direction to show them that not only is this what workers want, the views speak for themselves and that people are craving this information that we hope to deliver to them. So what is our impact? James, do you want to take away the 3 C's?
So her 3 C's are community, Congress, and corporate.
Corporate. So those are our 3 pillars that we've tried to make sure that no matter what we do, it in one form or another furthers a mission that we have amongst these pillars. So community, we might be able to see Christian up in this picture. Actually, there he is right there. So community is our utmost important pillar. We truly are trying to help the average workers. And how we are trying to do that is bringing workers in our community together to bring awareness to paid transparency issues. One of them being pay inequity in women's sports. We know that the WNBA has yes. The WNBA specifically, our Mystics are drastically underpaid compared to our Wizards. And so what we did was we coordinated a bunch of tickets that we gave out to our community for free, and we got these shirts that said Hoops for Pay Equity. So we brought our community to a WNBA game to show that we support pay equity there, and we showed up with our green and greening out this little section. We also host free workshops. I'm doing one on Thursday, tomorrow, teaching people how to learn how much they're worth, how to figure out their market rate. We do salary negotiation guides, market research guides. We have several free resources and tools that help our community earn what they're worth. Then legislation, which is our Congress pillar. We've done a good amount of lobbying and speaking with our representatives to make them aware that this is an issue that we care about and that their citizens and constituents, thank you, also care about. So we've spoken with Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, who has authored the federal pay transparency bill. We met with her and told her that we really support this, that something needs to be done to push this forward. We also testified in support of DC's Pay Range Act, which fingers crossed will happen here soon and become law. So pay transparency will be, thank you. We really would love to see pay transparency represent and bring value to DC constituents as well. And our main goal here is just to make sure that Congress is hearing all our voices and what we care about, and that we close pay gaps, not just in our cities, but nationwide. Our third pillar, which is corporate, has been the hardest one to push forward, despite their workers saying that this is what they want, and a clear gender pay gap occurring, there has not been much change to push pay transparency forward from a corporate standpoint. So our response to that was to create our own salary database in which people can submit their salaries, but also submit where they work, the companies that they work at. So in terms of helping others, one another out, people can see how much people are making at different companies and make sure that they're being paid fairly. So hopefully this will help push forward corporations to also see that this is important. If you'd like to submit your salary anonymously, you can go to salarytransparentstreet.com and share your salary and information there if you'd like. We have plenty of time for questions. Usually that takes up a lot of time, so please ask us anything about pay transparency, social media. Regarding the books, I would say launch a social media campaign, because if you want influence, that's a great way to do so. I'm so happy to answer any questions about social media as well.
How do you define a category, and do you have ranges?
Well, people submit their own salary, so they share how much they're exactly making, and then they provide contextual information. So their location, their industry, their years of experience, educational background, and company, which are all factors that help people determine how much they can make competitively. So those are the contextual factors that we group them by. But if you're like someone looking for an executive assistant role and you want to make sure that you're looking at an accurate salary to compare yourself to, then you would look at location, educational background, industry, all of that.
Thank you for coming. What you do is very important and fascinating. You both quit your day jobs, so my quick question is, how do you make a living now?
Yes, social media is incredibly lucrative. Our company has made over $1 million in revenue from brand partnerships. Our biggest partners are Indeed and Capital One, who have worked with us basically since we started because they believe in our mission as well. But we pay ourselves a salary. We have other team members as well that are freelance, so we have a whole team that we pay. I make $125,000 a year as my set salary, and I'm not legally allowed to say how much he makes, so I'm going to let him take it away.
65,000.
Yeah. But yeah, that's how much we make. Yeah.
So
thank you for being here. This really is important information. So looking at all the jobs that we have in the DMV, right now there's about 89,000 plus in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
No one to go into them. So how do you match up the fact that you have these categories, you have these salary grades, because many people can start, they're still in high school, pass the certifications, and they can start at $60,000, but they don't know that. Mm-hmm. So how do you match up the fact of all these open jobs that we have, particularly in high technology and the science arts, and get this information out so that people know that there actually are opportunities that they can get into? And thank you again for being here.
I guess it's just in terms of interviewing people who are willing to share. So one person will share, that they work in cybersecurity. We interviewed someone recently who worked in cybersecurity, and she shared her background, like how she got into it, her educational background as well, which is very important to determine what you qualify for within that range. And we just hope that the more people that share, the more information others can get, because you can't just compare yourself to one person. And so that's why we created the database, to hopefully get more information from people that we can't just run into on the street. But it is difficult, and I think that points out the fact that there is not enough information out there for especially high school students and those graduating into the workforce to know how to price themselves accordingly. And frankly, a lot of salaries are determined by a company's budget, not like the market research information out there. So the responsibility to pay people fairly shouldn't rest with workers, it should rest with companies. And so we're hoping that we can push them to be transparent and share that information, because it is so hard to compare yourself.
Thank you. So my question is about women's sports.
Yeah.
And being a former athlete myself and making way less than Holyfield and Ollie and all of them. How are you guys? So I can see you going into a basketball arena and wearing the shirts and putting that out there. But how are you getting to promoters? I mean, would you actually be able to confront or get to a promoter And I know that the same thing was going on in tennis as well.
Yes.
So you can go into the stands and wear the T-shirt, but it's a little bit different in boxing, and that's a little bit more of a brutal sport. It would be very helpful if you would help.
Yeah, and that's what we use our platform for. So we did the event, at the green out at the WNBA game, but then we made a post about it on social media. We talked to Neko Ogumike, who is the president of the WNBA Players Union, and we told her what we were doing. So we brought some awareness there. We just did an interview with Robin Sparks. A lot of this is WNBA focused, but it's an issue in all sports. We interviewed Robin Parks of the WNBA Chicago Sky, and she shared how much she makes with, could anybody guess how much an average? Yeah, it's terrible. And we made a whole YouTube video, very long, deep dive research into what the pay equity issues are. And so we're hoping to use our platform to just bring awareness to it and kind of shame them into paying the players what they're worth. And hopefully our community and fans of the sport can also bring awareness to it.
Which social media platforms were most successful for you? Was it LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram or
TikTok
Facebook?
and Instagram.
TikTok and
Yeah,
Instagram.
TikTok. Yeah, TikTok and Instagram.
The videos on TikTok or
My question is, first of all, thank you for your service.
Thank you for the
I
support.
appreciate that. Earlier, you mentioned about how your experience has been around getting off college and being underpaid. And I see my kids going through that soon. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So what kind of awareness are you guys raising, especially in the college? Parents are paying tons of money for those kids to go through the college, and then they're getting out there. They are kind of being scaled. You got the education, but not the experience. You got the experience, but yet I don't see a diploma. So have you guys looked into that? And if so, how do you guys get the words out to them?
Yeah, we're actually planning a college tour in the spring to speak with graduating seniors and share tools and resources to help them price themselves accurately. We provide a market research guide with to our followers. It's free, that teaches them how to find their market rate using actual free tools and resources available out there on the web. But ultimately, the situation with companies has to be resolved with the companies. And so that's why we really call on our community and people to pressure them to see that this is an issue and that, they're the ones responsible to actually fix it, instead of us just trying to find workarounds and trying to make sure that we know how much we make. They should be transparent from the get-go. But I would just share that there are resources out there to do market research and find a true market rate. But until we get companies on board, it'll be really difficult for all people to be paid fairly.
Hi, thank you again for coming. I have a similar question to that one. I'm in higher education, and in the Chronicle of Higher Education, there are several different reports about whether or not parents think that college is worth it. I've looked at those surveys, and the way the question is asked, the way it's answered, is really kind of misleading. And have you explored that as a topic that might shed light to the value of college? Because you started off, every single answer was depending on the education, et cetera. So I think that would serve the whole community well if people understood that college, even liberal arts colleges, are worth it. Thank you.
Yeah, we have a video right now going viral on our Instagram that is stirring that conversation up. It's a trades compilation of people that did not go to college and that are making pretty great salaries. And it does bring an issue to light that people are considering not going to college. But I would say that salaries have not kept up with inflation or cost of living. And a lot of us are seeing that the investment into getting an education, like an expensive 4-year degree, is not a smart investment considering the salaries that they're making out of school. So once again, I don't hold the keys to the castle, but I would really hope that corporations understand that that is a troublesome trend and that we do need well-educated folks in our society, especially teachers, which we're seeing a huge departure of them from their roles and going into other careers because teaching is not paying as well as it should, and people need to pay the bills. So we really need to hold companies accountable to pay people a fair living wage.
To further emphasize your point, getting the first job might pay well, but how will it be 5-10 years out? and how does education provide a multiplier effect for future salary?
Yeah, it's true that education is usually a prerequisite for a lot of solid office jobs. And so it's tough to chicken or the egg, you know, which one do you do, which one's required. I think that a cool trend we're seeing recently is companies not seeing the need for a degree instead of teachable skills, and that people who possibly went to school already but are not satisfied in their career, they want to transition into something else, they can go back to school like a community college or a more approachable education that's affordable to learn the skills to break into something else or maybe advance in their career. But sadly, education is so expensive in this country. I would know, I went to a very expensive school. I graduated with student loans. And when I graduated, I was one of the few in my senior class that didn't have a job lined up. A lot of my peers were able to pay off their student loans right away in financial consulting or working on Wall Street, but I was stuck for a little bit. So I think it differs on what everyone's goals are, but if education is so important, we need to make it more approachable, I think.
What was your major?
Management. Now I manage a company. Full circle.
I had a question and a statement, but now I have two statements and a question. If you want a free education, including living expenses, what do you have to do?
Military.
Military. 4 years in the military equals 4 years of college for free anywhere you want to go in the US. Okay? So my question is, how does your website differ from Glassdoor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. It was the primary reason that we built our website. When I was doing market research, I used Indeed and Glassdoor and all these resources, but it's incredibly difficult to compare yourself to an aggregated data point. So if you go to Indeed or Glassdoor and you search data analyst, it gives you one number that's an aggregated data point from the 15,000 submitted. Almost impossible to compare yourself to without those contextual factors. And so our database is an individual database. So if you search data analyst, it pulls back individual responses for each person. So then you can filter it based on where you live, education, and all these factors that give you a more accurate way to compare yourself to somebody else.
Awesome. But we still do encourage the use of Glassdoor, Indeed, and other sites like that.
Resources.
And then I guess my statement is, so I've been a recruiter for over 19 years, and part of my job is I negotiate salaries for people. So offers come in. The offer is never the offer. Mm-hmm. So if you know anyone, even coming out of college, when they get their offer, they need to ask for more. Yeah. And if you ask, there's a 98% chance you will receive.
Mm-hmm. I will say, though, studies have come out because one of the things that we found was women seemed like they didn't want to ask as much, but actually studies have come out recently from Harvard Business Review that found that women do ask as much as men, if not more. And even when they do ask, they still receive less. And workers of color in studies have been found, if they ask for the exact same amount as a white counterpart, they're actually seen as greedy and they receive a lesser offer. So what I see as an issue there is bias in the hiring process that needs to be addressed and figured out. AI may be a really great solution there, but I think that we need to remove the individual aspect of people applying for jobs and see them as their resume instead of the personal things that come into play where the biases occur.
Hi, thank you both so much for being here. I've been a TikTok follower since the beginning, so this is a celebrity sighting. I work for a nonprofit that supports people with disabilities, and one of our pillars is employment and trying to bridge that 81% unemployment gap of people with IDD, and also addressing that there are federal laws that allow companies to pay people with disabilities under the minimum wage of $7.50. So I just wanted to know, in your experiences talking to people, what that's looked like for individuals with disabilities.
Yeah. We've heard from people with disabilities that it's something they struggle with, and especially now with the return back to the office instead of remote work flexibility, it's becoming an exacerbated issue. Truly, the solution to equality with workers with disabilities is that flexibility aspect and allowing them the opportunity to work from home or have flexibility in the PTO. And so it's a very tricky issue, and I think something that corporations need to examine their values and their mission and who they want to work for their company. We've seen the more diverse a company is, the more profitable sometimes they are. So that's what I would argue to them is this is important, not just in your wallet, which is probably how they understand it best, but also that people matter, and we need to make sure that all people have equal hiring opportunities. Yeah.
Questions? I have two quick questions myself. One is, if there's no transparency in pay, I've always wondered, how are the gaps determined? In other words, if we don't actually know what people are being paid, how do you know that certain groups of people are being paid less than other groups of people? So that's one. And the second is, do you do analysis based on what you're finding in your, do you like produce analysis on different groups from your database based on what you're seeing in terms of the different criteria they're getting? And I guess the third is, do you deal with ageism, which is ageism is a big problem,
yes,
growing problem as people are going back into the workforce often later and trying to do new careers, and they're being told you're too old to do this job.
So first question was how the gender pay gaps are determined. I mean, I don't do the survey, so I can't speak for them, but I know that companies report their salaries for these surveys, like the Fortune 500. Also, over 12 states right now have pay transparency laws, which also includes pay data reporting laws. So every year, annually, they will have to report their salaries across the company. That will help determine gender pay gaps, age pay gaps. You know, it's not just gender. There's so many. There's racial, there's age, there's disability. There's so many. And so I think this annual reporting requirement will be really important so companies can see what their gaps are and figure out how to address it. The second question was analysis. Our database launched in July, so we are currently gathering a ton of data. I used to be a data analyst, so I know that you can't use a small data pool, otherwise you'll get wrong results. So our goal is to reach 10,000 salaries before we do analysis, but it'll be happening soon for certain. And ageism is definitely an issue. One of the things reverse actually that we're seeing is that we get almost every day a DM from someone saying that they've been at the company 5-10 years and the company just hired a brand new person straight out of college who's making more than them, and they're training that person. I've heard that story so many times, and that's a real issue and something that corporations should not be doing and should be held accountable for.
Yeah, but how do you solve that?
I think we got two last questions, then we're done.
Yeah.
So two questions. One, if you could explain DM to the room, and then
Sorry, what was
DM, if you could explain
DM.
and then two, there's a lot of people in this room who hire and who may not yet be on board with publishing salary bands to the world. Can you talk a little bit about what the benefit of doing so is to a company, especially a small business that may have limited funds?
Absolutely. So DM, you want to answer DM?
That's direct messaging.
So send us a message.
It's like a text, but it's via social media.
Yes. And then the real values of pay transparency, especially if you're a small company, it doesn't just apply to large companies. Studies have found that pay transparency improves employee morale. I mean, ultimately, if people feel respected, it's because they're paid well. That is the best way to garner respect. The other thing is it improves employee retention. So there's a reduced amount of people that will leave a company. It makes sense. If you pay them fairly, they're more likely to stay instead of leave. The other one is that companies are looking to hire new Gen Z graduates, and they are going to become the largest portion of the workforce here soon. So it is important to attract them. And for small companies that are trying to compete with larger companies, pay transparency is something that can make you stand out. Over 92% of employees recently in a Monster.com survey said that they would not apply to a job that didn't list the salary. It makes sense. You wouldn't go look at a car that you don't know the price of, right? I mean, your wife might, but but you want to make sure that you're listing what the salary is, because it demonstrates that you care, that you're demonstrating respect. And in a way, you can't demand loyalty from an employee if you're not what's the word? demonstrating it right back to them. And for Gen Z, pay is so important, especially graduating into the cost of living and inflation that we have in our current cities. Pay transparency, making sure people are well compensated, is the utmost value that they care about the most.
Last question.
All right. Yes. So tell me this, how do you determine when there's a small business salary for the same job as a big corporate company with a company that's just struggling to get started?
Mm-hmm.
And how are you going to be fair
Mm-hmm.
to the small company that can't afford what Amazon or Comcast or somebody else is going to do? And that goes to sports as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, basketball pot of money is billions of dollars. And so, but that's not the case for ladies basketball, for
Mm-hmm.
instance. So how do you determine that, and how are you fair about that whole thing?
So the WNBA issue, I'll address very quickly because it's very simple. The issue with pay inequity there is that the players aren't asking to make what Steph Curry or LeBron make. It's actually down to the contract. So the contract that they have with the league, in the NBA, players make 50% of the revenue of the league. So it's split 50-50 players and the organizations. Do you want to guess how much it is for the WNBA?
I know
It's less than 10%, which means that for that's your opinion. Reclaiming my time. I'm kidding.
I have to say something to this. Max, that is not, when I was boxing, women were the draw. Women boxing was the draw to a male card. So they would put us on first, and then to get people in the seats, and then they would show. And that's how we became contenders and were able to get belts and everything. So that's not true.
But what I would say, the example that I like to say here is that most people prefer iPhone to Android, but that doesn't mean that the workers at Microsoft and the CEO are paid drastically less than Apple. So it just comes down to if they're doing the work, if they're the reason that people are showing up, if they're the names on the back of jerseys, they deserve a fair contract. So the other question, was how small businesses can compete. This is where total compensation, I think, plays a really large part compared to base salary. So large companies usually will float a really high base salary compared to small companies. But it's not just pay that workers care about, it's flexibility. It's having access to PTO, maternal health benefits, paternal benefits. There's so many things that you can use to provide as benefits that make up total compensation that matters to the right candidates if you can't compete on pay. But demonstrating the pay is a great way to show that you care, to make sure that they understand what they're coming into, that there's no, money hidden anywhere. It just demonstrates respect.
Thank you so much. We really enjoyed your talk, and
you.
we learned a lot. I have to apologize to my son for turning down that first offer.
Don't take the first offer.
Exactly. Every single one of our speakers receives a tree planted in your honor. And so for each speaker, and you get a pen as well. You also have here where you can find your tree with the GPS coordinates. I think that's what it is. So we're having a tree planted in your honor, and we really enjoyed your talk. And I'm going to hit you on social media because I need some of your followers. All right.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Please, another round of applause.